Hello and welcome to National 5 Geography SQA Revision Support. This is obviously for the Forth Valley and Wesleyan RIC. So the intentions for this will be to develop your understanding of the upcoming SQA exams and the course syllabus for geography at National 5 level. And hopefully by the end of this you'll have a better understanding of how to correctly answer these questions. Throughout this video we'll be looking at these symbols. And you can take some time to pause the video to complete some tasks if you wish to. There will be some work here, some questions which you can attempt, and thereafter there will be some instructions on how you would answer that so that you could correct your work there. And there's occasionally things you might want to read and listen and copy or write down as well. So the SQA Study Guide, which was released recently, is for the 2022 National 5 Geography exam. This exam is 70 marks and you'll have 2 hours and 5 minutes to complete this in. So the exam syllabus will cover all the areas, so the exam will cover all areas of the exam syllabus as outlined in the specifications documentation released at the start of the year. Now the geography course spec is split into 3 main areas. The physical environment section, this is in the first part of your exam. This will cover topics such as land use and land use conflicts, landscape types and the weather. The human environment section will include questions on population, urban geography and rural geography, which will focus on a UK and then a developing country spectrum as well. And then you'll have to answer one question only on a global issues section. And there's a range of topics here which you may have done in class with your teacher, but remember you've only got to answer one of these for 10 marks. So the SQA released their study guide earlier, and in it they released a number of exam tips which they suggested you should follow. Now these are fairly evident ones which I think you'll be aware of already, but just to run through what they're saying, they're asking you to read the question carefully and then check that you've understood it properly. You should identify the command word. This is often in bold type in the questions, and then you should look for the key words in the questions. It will often help you keep, you can underline that or highlight that to help you keep on the right track. For example, they're suggesting that some of the common command words are using map evidence, describe in detail, for example, and the attractions of the area shown in the map. So for visitors, you may refer to physical and human attractions in your answer, and the command word describe and the keywords are using map evidence, physical and human. So there's a number of marks possible for questions. If there's a 6 mark question, suggesting you try and make 6 clear relevant points. Now some times, and you'll see this throughout this video, you get 2 marks for a developed point, but it's probably a good idea to try and go for 6 undeveloped points, and then if you manage to develop them in any way, you've got a few extra marks here. But if you use a 6 mark question, if you make 6 points, you're going to be on the right kind of line there to get good marks. And it suggests that perhaps a way of managing that is to leave a few lines at the end of each answer, so that if you do have time at the end, you can come back to a question and finish bits off. That's a good technique to do as well. Time management is important, so make sure you have a look at how many marks are available. For a 4 mark question, you've got roughly 6 minutes. So about 1.5 minutes per mark. Now I wouldn't suggest you check that after every question, but perhaps after a section you can have a look back and see just how far they're going through, how quickly going through the exam time. So there's quite a range of exam question types I've come up with, split basically into 3 main categories. We're going to start off first of all with OS map style questions. We'll look at data questions and then some more KU questions after that. So this is one of the OS map questions we're looking for. And the first thing which we'll look at in any question, in any exam, will be the first question is always on features. You're usually asked to explain the formation of a feature from a choice which you've got. So when identifying map evidence that shows an area of the coastline or deposition or erosion, it will look at upland limestone, glacial scenery or contains river valleys, and you need to pick the features. Now of course remember, you'll either be doing glaciation and coasts, or you'll be doing rivers and limestone. So avoid giving multiple examples of the same feature they've suggested. For example, a good answer about a river and its valley might contain evidence of a meander, a confluence, which is where a river or a tributary river meets the main river, an oxbow lake, and details of the width of that floodplain, but not multiple examples of a meander, for example. So it's just not make sure you don't repeat yourself. And then it says a good answer about coast may contain evidence of a cliff, a cave, an arch, a stack, Helen in the Bay, but not multiple examples of these. Now, that's hopefully fairly straightforward and common sensely, but let's look at what it would look like in practice. So, from the 2019 past paper, we can see this question coming up now. Obviously, we'll look at the example for rivers and limestone in a second or two. So this first question suggests that you should give map evidence which shows area was an upland or is an upland glaciated scenery for 4 marks. So what we're looking for here really is 4 discrete points, and each point you should hopefully identify a feature of glaciation and then give us either the name of that feature or more likely a 4 or 6 figure reference for that area. So let's look at that question then. This is what the map extract looked like, and we can see here there's a number of factors we can hopefully have identified. So a coil locking here in grid square 6442, now that's because it takes up most of that square, so that's appropriate to give a 4-figure grid reference here. There are several quarries on the map, but this one here in grid square 615404 is an example of a quarry. Now that's not taking up most of that square, so 6 figures is a good point for that, as is the arête. So there's an arête here, which is another glacial feature. Ribbon Lake, or a Ribbon Loch, sorry, is a Loch Tay. Now that in itself takes up several grid references obviously, so there's not any point doing that. It's a named feature, Loch Tay is there, so that's fine. And then we've also got that Tuncurry Spur in 5935. So there you can see a range of features that's been provided for us for this map, and the whole point is you want to give different features for each mark really. Okay. So this was a question in the same paper, but for the rivers and limestone section. So here you're asked to use a reference to describe the physical features of a river and its valley, and that's quite important. It's not just the features of a river, it's its valley as well. So it's obviously the same map extract. I've contained it slightly smaller, this one, just to focus on the river itself. And the first thing, which is always a good idea to do for these kind of questions, is to talk about the river and which direction it's flowing in. So here we have an example of the fact that it's flowing in the southeast direction. In general, obviously, it's mainly flowing southeast. It's mainly flowing through a narrow steep side river, river valley, and then later on it gets a much wider and flatter valley, and you need to have obviously some good references here to explain that properly, to illustrate properly what you're talking about. So you must have references for that section. There's a waterfall. Now, waterfalls generally aren't named, so you need to put in a good reference here for that, obviously, and a 6-figure good reference. There's a large meander. Well, there's actually several large meanders. You could probably get away with a 4-figure good reference here because there are several meanders in the same box, but in this case we've got a 6-figure good reference. And then tributaries. Now, the tributary river might be named, in which case you could refer to it by its name, but we've also got good references here as well. So definitely a good idea to make sure you've got a range of features, and you won't necessarily find every feature on the map extract obviously, so you want to supplement that with a few other things about the river valley, etc. So the second one we'll look at for map skills is scale. Now I've split the scale into sort of 2A and 2B because there's two kind of questions you might be asked about scale. This is the one the SQA referring to here. So in the skills questions, it's vital that you take time to accurately use your use of good references. For example, when measuring distance between 2 places, you should find the exact references and measure them accurately. Remember, the scale on the maps they're using are 2 centimetres to 1 kilometre. Now you could use that ratio, or indeed you could use the scale bar, which we'll come on to in just a second. So this is a question from 2018 past paper in which it's referring. I simply ask you to match the answers for the distances. So measure the 3 distances A, B and C between the places shown in the table and match your answers with the A, B and C shown below. So you've got 3 options, you've got 4 options, sorry, you've got 8.25 kilometres, 3.75, 6.25 and 12.5 kilometres. You've got to marry up which ones fit in for A, B and C. Now most of them are quite far apart, you know, 3, 6, 8 and 12.5 kilometres are all a bit far apart, so hopefully not any room for error there. So you want to measure distance between these two places, and the first question is for looking for the public telephone to the school, and then you want to essentially half that distance in centimetres to find our actual answer. So here we go. This was the first one. The letter A is from the telephone to the public to the school, and you can see that was 6.25 kilometres. Now you can always just count the boxes. That's another way to help you almost, but having a ruler is definitely a really good way to get this accurately answered. So hopefully you'll have a ruler with you in your exam on the day. And it's your exam, it's really important you do the best with this. So preferably with pencil perhaps, but even not, drawing the line on the map will help with this. So you don't be scared that it's a drawing a map if you want to use it to help you answer these questions. And then number B, or letter B, from Forest Farm to the church in Stratton St John, that's 3.75 kilometres. You can see it's obviously quite a bit shorter, that one. Similarly, we had to put this all on one slide, so this is clearly one that's much bigger, from Waterperry Gardens to the college. And you can see again here we've got the scale bar at the bottom, so you can use a scale bar simply to use your ruler to measure distances to find out what it is in kilometres. So that was the first type of scale question. This is the second type of scale question. And this is where you might be asked to study an ordnance survey map and then match the letters with the correct features. Now, it's important you've got an idea of contour lines here and scale to some extent to get this question correctly answered. So you can see here, we've got three options again, A, B and C, but there's 4 sections we could have picked. So we've got a river, a track, forestry and pylons. So you're asked to match up letters A, B and C with those correct features. So here you can see we've got the map extract, and all we've done here is we've highlighted the 4 options with a circle. So you can see the first one in the bottom right is the transmission lines, then the river, then a track and forestry. And we've given you answers here. A is a forestry, B is a river and C is a transmission lines. We need to go back to have a look at where that is, so you can pause the video and go back to that and check it out. But that's the correct answer there, the forestry, the river and the transmission lines. And that will be helped if you look at the contour lines and the scale to find out which one's which. Okay, so all 4 options are actually on the map on this transect. Again, you may want to use a pen or a pencil to draw a line on the map to make it easier for you, and then look at the cross section to see which one's which. So the third kind of question for OS map questions may be to give map evidence questions. So giving map evidence questions ask you to look at the OS map carefully. You can use place names, road names, buildings in your answer, but you could also include good references in your answer, and that's quite a good idea to do so. If it covers most of the square, you can use 4 figure, but in many cases you might want to use 6 figures, particularly if it's like a smaller building or feature like a church. So that's the questions. Remember, you're going to get OS map questions regularly in the first part of your paper, looking at the features, looking at the glacial or river features, for example, what we just looked at, or indeed in the urban section as well. And that's where this question comes from. So in 2019, you were asked to have a look at the OS map and for Wolverhampton, and to find the old industrial area in the grid square, and this area is to be redeveloped. So I've highlighted that in red to let you see it a bit more clearly, and it says using map evidence explain why this area is attractive for industry. So there's 6 marks here. You really want to try and give 6 points if you can. So here are quite a few of them. And the first thing I'd always advise people to look for is the contour lines. Is the land flat or hilly? So if it's flat, it means it's going to be easy to build on, and you can put in car parks, or you can put in other buildings. The site around the room has room for expansion, which is also good. It's away from the CBD, so it'll be cheaper land to buy. It's near main roads, and they've got a named example of a main road here, the A4124. So that means you can transport materials, and then you can read over this yourself at your leisure to see how you've got on with that. Okay. So moving on to our data questions now. The data questions come up in two places. You always get a data question in our global issues section, no matter what. But when you've picked question A for 4 marks, it's always a data question. And then you regularly get one other one, some across the population or the human section quite often has got another data question in it. Now, I split into two main sections. You might be asked to interpret a graph, or you might be asked to interpret a map. So we'll have a look at those just now. The first one is interpreting graph questions, and in these skills questions, when describing information from a graph, you should try to use precise figures and trends. Remember to look at the axes on the graph to see what is being measured. For example, in the question, describe in detail the changes in the export value and the ranking of the world's top exporting countries. So a relevant point would be in 1994 in the USA, what was the world's largest exporter with approximately $600 billion. Okay, so that's what they're advising you to do. This is a question, so like with other ones, you can pause here and attempt this yourself. Now, this one was focusing on trade, which you may not be doing, but the premise of this is exactly the same. No matter which topic you're doing for global issues, you will get that one of these questions, either a graph or a map question, as you describe in detail. So describe in detail the changes in the export value. So read the question carefully, because you make sure you describe the changes in this case, and that's from 1994 to 2004 to 2014. Now, very helpful, they've got 4 different countries we can look at, Germany, USA, Japan and China, and for that reason obviously it's quite handy because we've got 4 things to talk about. So if you have attempted that question, here's your marks. You can attempt to correct your answers here. But hopefully you'll get the idea very easily from this, is that we've really got to use the figures along the bottom of the axis along with the ones at the side of the axis. So for example, it says at the bottom, by 2014 Germany has dropped down again to a 3rd place with 1,600 billion US dollars. So we're looking for a trend here, in which case drop down is a trend. We've got the dates and we've got the amounts. Now if you can include all of those things in a short answer, you'll get a mark for that. So dates, amounts and a trend. Is it going up, down, is it fluctuating, is it highest, second highest, whatever it might be. Okay. So our second type of the data questions is describing from maps. And this is very common again in our data analysis questions, which is in the first part A of our global issues sections. But you might again get questions like this in the human section, looking often around populations, quite common to see it. So the example we'll look at this time comes from one about healthcare. And in this case, it's advising us to try and give certain place names, for example, cities or countries or continents, to make sure you include the examples of the category shown in the key in this case. So this one asks us to describe in detail child mortality rates across the world. A relevant point could be infant mortality rates are highest in developing countries, while Europe, North America and Australasia have the lowest rates of child mortality, with between 1 to 25 per 1,000 children. So here we can see the actual questions from 2019, and it says describing detailed child mortality rates across the world. You can see, again, in this case, we've got 5 keys in the map, so 4 marks. Good idea to use 1 for each, perhaps. And you just want to use some countries or continents in your answer here as well. So you can perhaps also look at continents, like Africa's obviously got a very high number of child mortality rates, with many countries in Africa having over 101 to 300 deaths per 1,000 children, which is quite devastating. And in other continents like North America and Europe, you can sort of combine together. You might pick out countries, for example. You could say for many parts of Asia, it's only like China that's got the lowest 1 to 25 deaths per 1,000 children. So those are the things you want to look at, countries and continents, and again look for trends. Okay. So if you've stopped the video and done this question yourself, here's the answers for you, or the mark instructions I could say for you. Infant mortality is highest in developing countries, so that's a mark. Europe, North America and Australia have the lowest rates of child mortality, between 1 and 25 per 1,000 children. and you get the rest just there. You can read over that yourself and mark your own answers if this is one you've tried to do yourself. So we mentioned that we can also get it in other parts of the question. So here's one example of that. This is from the 2018 paper. It says here, describe in detail the difference gross national incomes in 2015 worldwide. So you may want to pause it here and attempt this question. This was compulsory for everybody because it was in the compulsory part of the exam in the first or the second section in the human environment section. So just to illustrate that for you. And here we have our mark instructions. If you have attempted that question, you can have a look at your answers here as well. And it obviously has the same type of things here we've looked at already. So I've got named countries, often split into the highest or lowest or other such trends or groups. And we've got the amounts. So every answer here that's got a mark has got an amount next to it. For example, the GNI of the USA was greater than $4.93 trillion. So you want to definitely put in the amounts as well as geographical areas. So we'll now look at the KU questions. So this makes up a fairly large percentage of the overall marks, obviously. And there's a variety of keywords which they might want to use here. In fact, we're going to look at 5 different kinds of questions in the KU section, okay? And the first one is describe questions. So in a describe question, you need to say what is there or what is happening. If you're describing from a resource, you should include specific information from the source. This could be numerical or geographical information, or it could be the words that you give you to prompt as you are what to write about. So look at an example in a second from our human issues section. You must name the development country or city that you have studied in class. If you don't, you may well lose a mark. So if it's asked you to look at a case study, for example, then you want to go to mention that. So this is the question that we're referring to in the documents from the SQA. And again, you might want to pause the video here and complete this yourself and see how you get on. It says, referring to developing worlds that you have studied, describe different ways shantytowns are being improved. And you can see there's a photograph there of shantytown to indicate what we're looking for you to do. And then there's a quote as well. Now, it's important you have a look at those, but the question really is from your own knowledge. It's a knowledge-based question. So you want to really start off by saying, the city I have studied is, and then give us 4 distinct ways in which they are being improved. So if Rio de Janeiro was chosen, here are a number of things you could say. And you get the idea, hopefully, here again, of what we mean by a developed point and a point. So if you can put in 1 mark and you can put in 4 single points, then you get a mark. If you can put in a developed point, if you can explain it a bit more in detail, give examples of it, you might even get a second mark for that as well. So our second type of question for KU questions is explain questions, and to be fair, most of the categories, most of the questions fall into one of these two. We'll look at other ones as well. In explain questions, you need to say why something is there or why something is happening. So words like because are really good words to use in explain answers. For example, in the question explain the difference in the population structures of Bolivia and the Netherlands, you should refer to both birth rates and death rates in your answer. A relevant point could be that birth rates are reduced because there is more gender equality in the Netherlands, meaning that there is plenty of career opportunities for women. So here is a question. You may want to pause it here and attempt it yourself, and then we can check it in the next slide. And it says explain the difference in the population structures of Bolivia and the Netherlands. You should refer to both birth and death rates in your answer. Now, if you don't refer to both birth and death rates, you will not get full marks. In fact, often if it's a 6-mark question, the highest you could get is 4 marks for any one of those 2 parts of the answer. So you really want to put in something on both. Doesn't need to be a 50-50 split, doesn't need to be 3 points and 3 points. If there's more you can say about birth rates or more about death rates, then that's fine. And obviously you're looking for the differences between the 2 countries. So using words like greater or less or more is a good comparison statement to use between these 2 things. The most important word for you to use really is going to be because. That's the word we're looking for you to use mostly because it's an explain question. mean, there are other things you could say like due to or therefore. Those words are also suitable, but because is the go-to one to look at. So here we've got two epoxy pyramids, and you can see that Bolivia is on the left. It's got a much wider base in comparison to the rest of its pyramids. To say the base is the widest part of the pyramids. That indicates it's got a high birth rate, sorry, and then there's a tapered side that looks a bit like a pyramid, but that means it's got a high death rate. The Netherlands is the opposite. It's got a base which, although quite wide, isn't the widest part of the pyramid. It's a fairly straight side to the pyramid here, indicating it's got a low birth rate and a low death rate. And you're asked to explain why that's the case. Why has one got a high birth rate and one got a lower birth rate? So a 6-mark question, there's quite a lot of things you could see here obviously, and you can take some time to pause the video and correct your work here, or if you've not done the question, just to pause it and read over some of these in a bit more detail. And again, hopefully you can see the difference between a point and a developed point. So we've got, for example, birth rates are lower in the Netherlands because, or as, women tend to choose to have fewer children later on in life. That's a mark. But we might have something like, the Netherlands also have pension schemes and facilities to support elderly people, for example, care homes, so death rates are lower. That indicates 2 marks, because it's a more detailed response with examples given in the answer as well. So there you can see the differences between the two kind of points you can make. The advice, however, obviously is to try and give 6 points to get your 6 marks. If you try and go for developed points, more often you might not make it and you'll lose marks that way. So our next type of KU question is a matching question. Matching questions are as you compare two things. They often use OS map questions to match grid references. Do the more obvious matches first to make it easier for you. This one, for example, they're saying you are asked to match each of the urban land use zones with the correct grid references. So this example, the CBD would normally be the easiest one to find, so go for that one first, is what they're suggesting. It's often the case that for a question that's, for example, for 3 marks, you're going to get 4 options. It's worthwhile doing all options in case you've made a mistake. Don't just do the first 3, and if you've got them marked up, you assume the 4th one is wrong. It might not be the case. Do all the options and find all the different options. So this obviously illustrates the point we're making. You've got 4 urban land use zones to pick from and only 3 references to look at. If you go through all 3 of them, make sure you go through all 4 options to match up which one's which. So the question says, study the ordnance survey map extract of Edinburgh and match your references with the correct urban land use zone. So do each of the 3 references and check which one's which. More than likely, the CBD maybe will be the easiest one to pick. So if you've got one, the first one you go to, you're not sure, write down both, work your way through all the answers, and then you might want to score the one that's incorrect off the list if you need to. So here we have the map extract itself, and I've again, to make it easier for ourselves, because we can't really see references on this, because it's only a part of the map obviously, I've highlighted the 3 boxes in red. And hopefully you'll be aware anyway that the CBD tends to be in the middle of the city, and then we've got the inner city obviously, and then the suburbs on the edge of the city. So that makes it easier for you almost immediately if you do it this way. And although we prefer you do it in pencil if possible, remember, if you need to draw on your map to make sure you get the correct answers, then you can do that as well. So choose the correct references which marry up with the land use zones. Now, you don't have which one's which here, so although this question is suitable for you to try at home, it's not quite so straightforward. So if we go for A, B and C, which one is the CBD, the new housing, the new industry, or the old housing? So CBD is in this square here. Hopefully you might be able to make out the castles there, the train stations there, a variety of blue symbols for tourist symbols like art galleries and museums is there as well. So that's clearly the CBD. The old housing in a more kind of grid iron street pattern and close to the CBD is the next box, which really means this last box down at the bottom is new housing, because it's got cul-de-sacs in the edge of the city. There is more open space, and so that's new housing. So number 4 of 5 is our KU questions. It says give advantages and or disadvantages for this question. So in this it says you must give both advantages and disadvantages in your answer to gain full marks. And give advantages and disadvantages questions, you must give advantages or disadvantages in your answer. Read the question carefully and note what you've been asked to do. For example, in the question, give the advantages and disadvantages of recent developments in farming in developed countries like the UK. Relevant points would be the farmer makes an income from non-farming activities, such as accommodation, farm shops, quad biking, farm attractions, agricultural exhibits, farm wildlife tours and country sports. There are advantages, and rising tourist numbers in rural areas cause conflict, cause traffic congestion, increased air pollution are disadvantages. Now we'll have a look at the actual question in a minute and also the marking instructions to see how much of that you need to write for each mark. So the question was from 2019. You can pause the video here and complete this this question and then check it in a second or two when we move on. And you can see the questions for 6 marks, so 6 different points. You have some clues around the stem, around the picture here to help you with it. So we've got new technology, organic farming, diversification, GM crops and current government policy are all things you could talk about, but some of which you need to say more than once because it's a 6 mark question. So you have to explain advantages and disadvantages, and you need to do both to get full marks, so probably only 4 marks will go for one of those, either advantage or disadvantage section. So we've only taken a small section of the actual full mark instruction here because there was an awful lot there for you to look at. But if we were to compare advantages for diversification between these two pictures, you can see you can almost get, or you could get full marks just in this one section, but you need to have advantages and disadvantages as we've mentioned already. So how much detail do you need to go into to get a mark? Well, as you can see, not as much hopefully. So wind farm developments on farming land also generates extra income as a mark. Try and not talk about other things that generate extra income, because once you've really used that extra income part, it's just becoming a repeat point, whatever the aspect of it is. You can see that they could get extra income from non-farming methods, and they've got a whole range of things there. Although that's down there for 1 mark, you don't need to write all of those things for a mark. Just 1 or 2 examples would be enough, not all of those things. Farmers become more independent and less reliable on subsidies from the government as a mark. Visiting a farm means people experience rural landscapes and outdoor activities as a further development of that, and a mark as well. So all those things are advantages. Disadvantages, be careful not just give me the opposite side of things. You've got to do something different with your answer here. So rising tourist numbers in rural areas cause traffic congestion and increased air pollution, that's a mark. Dry stone walls are damaged by people climbing over them as a mark. Footpath erosion damages the natural landscapes, a mark. Be careful not to give this an answer which is solely about conflicts from your land use section question. It might not allow you to get full marks here if you just were to answer it in that way. So just make sure you answer the question carefully and properly. So the last section we've got for this is our last part of the KU questions, is weather questions. And weather questions, it will help if you have learnt what different symbiotic symbols mean. You should memorise which way the wind blows around depressions and anticyclones. That is very helpful. It would be a lot easier if it was the same as an anticyclone, but remember, the wind goes clockwise around an anticyclone and anti-clockwise around a depression. Try not to get those mixed up. So the first one you might be asked is to do with this one. It asks you to draw a weather season circle to show the weather conditions described above. Now there's 4 weather conditions. It's a 4 mark question. So that should be hopefully something which you can manage to do. So if you wanted to try this, and you can pause the video and give this a shot, and we'll reveal the answer in the next slide. So hopefully your weather station circle looks a bit like the one here. The feathers on the tail which indicate the speed of the wind. Now it's important you've got 3 long lines here which indicates 30 knots. Doesn't matter however if you're pointing to the right or to the left, so don't worry if your feathers for that point in different directions. It's not really relevant. What is relevant is that that line is going up the way, going north, because that's where the wind is coming from. Sky obscured means you've got a cross there. That means you can't see the sky. Possibly because of lots and lots of mist or fog, low cloud, and that would be the case here because it's got snow showers, so that would obscure the sky for that reason. Slightly different from octas. Obviously, if we've got 8 octas, that means you can't see any part of the sky. The cloud cover here, it's slightly different. But there we've got snow showers. Remember, the wee triangle is for showers, and obviously the kind of asterisk is the snow. So we're almost finished, but this is our other weather question. It comes up quite regularly, as explain the changes that will take place in the weather and still over the next 24 hours. This is a depression question from 2018. Again, you may want to stop the video here, pause the video here and attempt this question. The answer on the next slide, so we'll come to that in a second. It indicates the path of the depression. Make sure you're aware that the depression will move from west to east, and it'll take approximately a day or thereabouts for it to complete the full transit across from Ireland across to the North Sea past the UK. So over 24 hours, it will pretty much go from where it is out into the North Sea, and you've got to look at what that effect will be on Stirling. Now, it's a 5-mark question, and I would advise my pupils to look at the 5 weather elements. That is wind speed, wind direction, cloud cover, temperature, and precipitation or rainfall, if there is any. And that allows you to get a mark for each of those points. Of course, you could look at it as a stage of depressions across, as it goes from the cold air to the warm front, the warm air to the cold front, the cold air again, and that's another way of looking at how you could split your answer up into those 5 parts as well. So if you've paused the video and you've attended this question, we'll go over answers in the next slide. So here we have, due to the approach of the warm front, Stirling's air pressure will fall, cloud cover will increase, and the rain will fall. Now we really are looking for you to include, as an explain question, some more explanation here as well. So winds will be stronger as us are closer together. That's a really good, fairly straightforward and nice concise answer to give us. Explains why the winds get stronger. Because Stirling is in the warm sector, the depression temperature will rise, and it will become mild with some cloud cover and occasional showers. So you can see here how much information you need to put in to get your answers in this stage. So that's us finished our explanation of and examples from the study support guides from the SQA. I hope you found that informative and interesting. And just to reiterate, we're not far away now, obviously, from our geography exams. The National 5 exam is on Wednesday, 27th of April, between 1 and 3 o'clock, or 5 past 3. So all the best luck for MD for you guys who are sitting your exam then, and hopefully it goes well for you. Thank you for listening.